All right, it's another film study as we're going to look back at the Week 11 mess of a game. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm ready to keep moving forward in this Ravens season.
Yeah, that's about what we're doing at this point. It's obviously been a disappointing stretch, but we're gonna hopefully get through it. Not good news today with the COVID situation, but the good news of today is that Jason Wollbert is joining us to talk about the
Hello.
defense from us. How you doing, Jason?
Hi. I'm alive and for the most part healthy, so I'm counting my blessings there.
Very good.
And that's exactly where we got to start this game is with health, as the Ravens have some COVID news today, and then the NFL has also kind of taken a step back after the Ravens news to try to make things even more stricter with mask wearing and everything. So COVID is definitely affecting the NFL right now.
So I did not see the NFL's response to this. Is it just another memo saying you have to follow procedures A and B and C and D?
It is limits to 62 players on the field. So you got to be careful with, can't have your injured guys just hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
And it is everyone on the sideline wearing masks, and play callers having to wear like the big glass visor or plastic visor if they don't choose to use the mask. So it's just more strict like that, and then less handshakes. Like to go greet each other at the end of the game, you have to put a mask on first.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you're laughing because it's weird because they can all touch each other and be in each other's face on the football field, and then we got to be careful. But the NFL is doing whatever they can to try to get this season in, and I think right now the Ravens might have the one of the riskier moves as they've got a game in 4 days.
Yes. Game in 4 days, 2 on the COVID list, another one added as a close contact, Brandon Williams, but obviously J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram, 2 big losses at running back. And it's an opportunity for someone from the positive standpoint. But Jason, how do you put it like that? Gus Edwards obviously going to get some carries. Maybe they even used him less on Sunday in anticipation of this somehow.
If I were the Ravens front office, I'd be doing everything in my power to get the NFL to push back the date of the game coming up.
For lots of reasons.
For lots of reasons. But the least of which right now is to be able to actually get Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell potentially on the field against the Steelers. If they're not able to do that and they have to play Thursday, more and more of the situation on offense anyway that the Ravens have gone through with the injuries and COVID now is lending me to believe they should start spreading the offense out more. I think they should start thinking about going with more 1-1 personnel and 3 wide or perhaps even 4 wide. And I know that may sound strange to people who realize that wide receiver production is down as it's ever been lately with the team. But I am of the belief that right now, personnel-wise, and if you want to get the best 11 people out there on offense, 3 or 4 of them are going to be wide receivers. And you could run Gus Edwards. The problem with having Gus Edwards there in such formations is that the teams won't necessarily respect him as a receiver, in which case I would seriously consider using him as a receiver because I have seen him be able to catch the ball. I mean, and then of course Justice Hill.
This year he is not.
Yeah. And then Justice Hill, that's supposed to be part of his calling card, even though he wasn't really a huge receiving threat in college. People see his body type and how he moves and imagine him being that. But
they imagine that, but he has not been a good pro receiver so far. He's caught 9 out of 16 balls thrown his way, which is embarrassingly low for a running back. 4.5 yards per target, I should say. But right. Jason, we got to get back to the defense here. And
sorry,
Josh has got a reader to do.
Well, no, and I was going to say we're going to get into that in deep in the offense tomorrow. I think the big takeaway is just COVID and how the NFL is handling this. And did they give any leeway about reevaluating Thursday, or is it just we're playing unless more things come out?
I have not heard. I didn't even hear the single page of new
Okay.
rules that the NFL had set up. So I presume there's an opportunity to move the game, but the Ravens are now in a situation where he's past the bye week. So it's not the Ravens are past the bye week. So
Right.
they'd have to make up a week 18 of the season.
Right. Exactly. And I guess that's what the NFL is trying not to do through all this.
I suppose because it's a nationally televised game on prime time that they wouldn't be able to swap it out with something else. They're not in the flex part of the schedule yet.
Gotcha. I guess that makes sense that the NFL really wants a game on Thanksgiving night as well.
I mean, it's a game that can't be moved. If it were a Monday night game, even they could move that without too much difficulty. But a Thursday night game, you can't move somebody else into that spot.
Yeah.
So they'd have to have it be a nationally televised game, maybe on Saturday, maybe on Monday, maybe on Tuesday, even if they wanted to really move it back and make it be a practical thing. And if you move it to Sunday, then that creates a problem for next Thursday, because then the Cowboys will have played on a week's rest, and the Ravens will be playing on 3 days rest. So I don't think that'll work either.
Sadly, everything right now points to a beatdown Thursday. So you may just have to take your medicine and move on, being 6-5 towards the last chunk of the schedule, in which case things soften up a little bit.
All right.
Easier teams.
All right. Well, with the COVID news, that's changing every day. So we'll cover that again tomorrow as we look ahead. But today we're going to look back and especially look at the defense. But first, I got to get to MyBookie. Thanksgiving is about traditions like the turducken and mashed potatoes and betting on football with MyBookie's Turkey Day free play. It's MyBookie's third annual Turkey Day free play this Thanksgiving, which is your chance to bet up to $250 risk-free on the early Thanksgiving game. The Turkey Day free play is a no-risk, all-gravy wager on the full game spread. Pick the right team and you win. If your team is upset, your bet up to $250 is refunded before the next afternoon game. New players also will get their first deposit matched halfway up to $1,000 to help add even more excitement to the greatest football weekend of the year. So that's right. Make your first deposit and get extra cash that you can use on parlays, teasers, whatever else you want. Plus, we got that big boxing match this weekend as well. Use the promo code RAVENS in order to claim your bonus and free bet. Plus, the best part is that's only the beginning. MyBookie has promotions all holiday weekend. It starts with the Thanksgiving free roll. Then it rolls into Black Friday boosted odds for the Black Friday weekend. So, and then Cyber Monday is buy one, get one free bets on Monday Night Football. So big weekend over at MyBookie. Hop on board and use the code RAVENS to claim your freebies. All right, guys, let's do something a little better than the Ravens did Sunday and tackle this defense.
All right. So obviously not the defensive outing that we would have liked to see, Jason. A significant chance to the Ravens, their chance to make the playoffs, a significant blow to it. Obviously, the Titans are a team who's likely to finish second, I think, now that the Colts beat the Packers in the South, which means the Ravens are a direct competitor for a playoff spot.
They're going to have to beat the Browns again, sweep the Browns, and their playoff chances get a lot better. But if they lose to Pittsburgh, they'll be 6-5. They'll have a lot of teams under 500 for the rest of the way on their schedule. But the Browns are also there, and they're going to have to. They're going to have to contain their run game like they weren't ultimately able to do this past Sunday.
Yep, indeed. I looked at the Pittsburgh game initially. The Ravens are only 3-point dogs. The COVID news came out today. They're up to 4.5 last I checked, which is not an insignificant dog, but it still gives the Ravens a pretty good chance to win this game, which is a little surprising.
Well, the good news about the NFL is that it is week to week, and there's always surprises. Every week there's a surprise or two or five, and home field advantage isn't what it used to be pre-COVID.
That's certainly true.
It's certainly possible. I mean, all they have to do is execute well and have Pittsburgh make a few mistakes, and just like that, you'll beat them. This isn't exactly Jacksonville without Gardner Minshew. I mean, the Ravens are still better than that.
That's true, and this is not a great Steelers team. Okay, it's a very good Steelers team, but the Steelers team are nowhere near as good as their record.
Yeah, there are no great teams. Maybe Kansas City is a great team. We'll have to see. But I mean, generally speaking, there are no great teams in the NFL these days.
And
every now and then you get one.
Very easy schedule so far for Pittsburgh, and they've certainly struggled even with some of the easier opponents, but certainly with some of the more difficult opponents, they've had very close games each time. So, right. There's a lot to like about Pittsburgh. If you're them, they have a good quarterback, they have a good set of receivers, they have a very good defense. They have a good pass rush that supports the rest of that defense. But I'm optimistic about the Ravens' chances. If you had to call it right now, would you go with the points or lay the points this weekend?
I would probably. I'm not much of a betting man. I try not to get into sports betting like that. But if I had to, I'd go with Pittsburgh in the points before it goes up too high. Because there's a lot of money that's being laid on Pittsburgh right now, and that makes you wonder. You see something like that, and you see a line moving so much, and you wonder if Vegas knows something we don't. But ultimately, I'm not sure if the Ravens win another game until Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams get back.
Well, those injuries obviously played a huge role in this game. Very disappointing to me that the Ravens, even without those two, were unable to take advantage of a Titans offensive line that's just bubblegum and duct tape. And I want to take you through quickly what was wrong with that line. I promise this won't take more than a moment or two here. But
sure,
just to go through what they've been through. The Titans had Taylor Lewan, who's a terrific left tackle. They lost him after 5 games. His replacement, Ty Sambrailo, started against the Ravens, but he was injured midway through quarter 4. They brought in David Quessenberry. This is not the Royals reliever of the 1980s, though it might have well been, because this guy's age 30 and has had 50 previous career snaps. And he led them on all the long down the field drive that gave them the go-ahead score to go up 24-21. He was at left tackle for that drive. Roger Saffold, the left guard, sat out with an ankle injury. Big injury for them. He was replaced by an undrafted free agent rookie, Aaron Brewer, at left guard. 10 previous career snaps. And get this, he's 6'1", 274, which is probably the smallest guard to take a snap in the NFL this season, if I had to bet.
That's, And Ben Jones, the center, was coming off of an injury and was still a little bit banged up.
That's
during
right.
That game.
So he missed practice all week. He had to come out for one snap, and the backup center, Jameel Douglas, airmailed the shotgun snap for loss of 20, which, by the way, is nice to see, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It reminded me of something. I wasn't quite sure. Jones got a random poke in the eyeball, and he had to leave for that snap.
That looked nasty, didn't it? Blood and a poke in the eye. A poke in the eye where the guy's eye is a little red, but there's no blood. I'm fine with that.
This was a very physical game. The Titans remind me, when I saw them in this particular game, especially regarding coaching and just overall mindset, they looked a lot like the Patriots, especially with this. I mean, just plugging guys in that have had so many snaps and them executing like that is something that a Belichick team would do. And I wonder, just offhand, if it's not Belichick's offensive assistant coaches that you need to hire former Belichick players like Vrabel. If you want to have a team that executes like that. But they did make their fair share of mistakes, and it was such a frustrating game because the Ravens played, in my opinion, they actually played well, particularly the defense, for 3 quarters. And the Titans' offense was not very complicated. I mean, looking at the plays that they did on so many of their 1st and 10s, it was Derrick Henry up the middle for 3 yards. would have reminded a lot of Ravens fans of the Ravens offense, running Mark Ingram or Gus Edwards up the middle for 3 yards on first down over and over and over again. And we would be complaining about Greg Roman. But there it is. The Titans were doing it. And as we'll go over a little bit later, there were a couple turning points where the Ravens just didn't have the depth that they needed. And I'll give a couple defensive linemen credit for playing their butts off, but eventually they just wore down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that was one of the big stories of the game was the Ravens did not have a fifth defensive lineman. They had one available, Aaron Crawford, who had a very high run grade at North Carolina last year. It was one of the highest rated run grade players according to PFF last year. And he, for whatever reason, they decided not to activate him for this game. I can tell you the whatever reason too. They activated 3 guys off the practice squad. One was a COVID call up, that was Bryant, and 2 others were their 2 practice squad call ups for the week, who were Wilson and Holden. So it's not like those guys didn't play. It's just a matter of what asset did they really need more, and could they have made yet another roster move in order to bring Crawford up?
Considering the personnel that they put out there, the defensive formations throughout the game, then you would have to imagine that having a fifth defensive lineman would have been a priority.
Absolutely. Yeah, so they played, you're referring to the fact they played more base defense in this game than they have any other game this season, 37 snaps. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last 2 weeks, they basically played half of the total base they've played the entire season. They played 37 this week, 34 last week against New England. Both were season highs consecutively. And that's basically half of the base snaps they've played. You mentioned that the base defense, you mentioned the run game they held up pretty well for 3 quarters. The base defense in particular was doing quite well. They had allowed, I'm going to get this right, 51 yards on 14 carries. So 3.6 yards per carry through 3 quarters. And then just the base defense. We're not talking about the nickel getting gashed or, they had some dime defense on the field. We'll get to that later. But in the 4th quarter and overtime, the Titans ran for 85 yards on 9 carries, 9.4 yards per carry against the base defense. It is completely unacceptable to allow 4 yards per carry with the base defense.
There are a couple plays, but one in particular that were turning points in the game for me, and they also happen to be highlight plays. But I mean, for me, and you'll go over this in the offensive podcast, but the interception chuck, that really, to me, the way I look at it, that was the turning point, because the Titans proceeded to go on an 11-play drive after that, and they started to dominate time of possession after that. And because of the way they were built, because of the offensive, I mean, they were in 1-2 or 2-1 for most of the game. They had a couple 1-3s in there and stuff like that. Yep. But pretty much the only time that they had 11 personnel was on 3rd down. When they got to 3rd and 7, a number of times they came out with 11 personnel. And for the most part, over the first 3 quarters, the Ravens were able to stop that. There were a couple conversions, but you have to expect a couple breakdowns on 3rd down over the course of any game, of any particular game. And of course, they came out and they scored the touchdown on the first drive. But between that and even when they were doing their comeback, the defense was able to hold them to field goals up until that A.J. Brown play, which was the other one. That particular play, they were still holding on by a thread, but the pass to A.J. Brown, where he broke four tackles on that play, that was when that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The will of the defense, I think, was done after that, and you kind of saw that in overtime.
Well, I thought that the Titans honestly really gave them a couple of big breaks. One, they had a botched snap that resulted in a sack that took them off a a close play. They had an incomplete pass on 3rd and 2 where I thought they should have gone for it on 4th and 2 and left the Ravens right down by the goal line had they not made it.
I was surprised they went for the field goal there, but they did.
I think it was a bad call. So analytics wise, I don't think it really makes sense. And then they also had the airmailed snap that lost them 20 from the 7-yard line and forced them to kick a field goal. And for whatever reason, Gostkowski seemed to find his leg and things were right for him this game after having a lousy year so far.
They made enough plays. The Ravens didn't. I mean, that sounds silly. It's very simplistic, but it's true.
Yeah, I agree. My only point to kind of address what you're saying is I think they killed themselves rather than the Ravens are holding them to field goals. I think they held themselves to field goals.
Oh, okay.
On those drives. I think this basically from midway through the third quarter, they basically had their way with the Ravens defense.
Well, I certainly think that they could have scored touchdowns there for sure. They had the capability of scoring touchdowns there, yes.
From 9:34 the third, they had an 8-play 53-yard drive, a 12-play 81-yard drive, a 10-play 90-play drive. They knelt out the game for 15 seconds with 1 for -1, and then in overtime they had 6 for 73.
Yeah,
it doesn't get much more dominating than that.
Yeah, it was done.
Yeah,
after that point.
Another thing that there's a lot of things about how this went down that we could talk about and that bother me about the individual things. I thought, we're talking about the tired defensive line. Madubuike and Washington were shut out on the defensive score sheet. That's even with a tired group. That shouldn't happen. They should have been making some tackles because the Titans were running the ball plenty. And beyond that, neither of them had a pressure event. In fact, the entire interior defensive line had only 1 pressure, and I think it was 74 pass rush snaps. So totally unacceptable in terms of what they got from the down linemen.
Yeah, I think Ellis and Wolf, particularly Wolf, who, if I had to name a defensive MVP in this game, it would probably be Wolf, performed admirably for that period of time, but it was mostly in run defense. They didn't contribute a whole heck of a lot as far as pressuring. And eventually their legs gave out.
I just misstated something. I want to be careful about this. It was 1 out of 74. Sorry, on pass snaps. It was 1 out of 74. So Ellis had the only pressure of any interior defensive lineman. Not much, obviously, to get out of that group. Here's the problem with this. Let's say Campbell and Williams are not back, and you're already indicating you think Thursday is a beatdown. My problem is there is no magic formula to rearrange the chess pieces that remain to Martindale that will make this defense all of a sudden be able to stop the run. There's no additional defensive lineman they can get other than Crawford, who they obviously were unwilling to elevate. There's no other way to align this defense. They already tried 3 inside linebackers in this game. We get to that a little bit later in packages, but I don't see how they can realign this defense to make it hold water. Oh, we might have lost Jason here.
I think I've lost you.
Did we lose him?
Okay, Jason, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, you got
okay now?
I'm hearing a little bit, just a tiny little bit, but I can't gather what you're saying.
Mark the time, Josh, so we can edit it.
And it just magically got better.
Okay.
All right, so you're good?
We're not sure, but that's okay. Are you okay now that you can hear us?
Yeah, I just kind of let you go on talking until you paused there so that you could have a clean break.
Okay, we're in non-recording time, so Josh, you got us right from here.
I got it all marked, so take it from now.
All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about the packages the Ravens played in this game. We kind of hinted at this with some of the base package stuff, but I want to go through that quickly, Jason, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Played 1 snap at jumbo. That was actually a memorable snap in this game on the goal line. They had Board in as what will normally be a 3 safety package. So they took Peters off the field. They took Elliott off the field. Not sure why they take Elliott off the field for Board. which is effectively the exchange they're making, but they put Board on the end of the line of scrimmage, which gives him coverage responsibility, which was then beaten by Jonnu Smith for a fairly easy 1-yard touchdown run across the formation. Very reminiscent of the opener against Cleveland when there were actually 2 receivers running a pattern over there, but effectively the same kind of a toss for a TD.
Elliott looked, from my vantage point, like he was the best tackling defensive back in the game. So I'm not sure. Again, I kind of agree. Why would they take him out for that one play? But it was just one play, and the Ravens have been vulnerable to tight ends all season. They've given up more touchdowns to tight ends than wide receivers this year.
Did not know that. Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable branded emails, text messages, and more so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's klaviyo.com/grow. So let's move back to talk about the jumbo package. They only played that for 1 snap, but they gave up a touchdown on the snap. Very reminiscent of a touchdown they gave up in the opener against Cleveland. Board on the line of scrimmage all the way on the offensive left side, replaced effectively Elliott for the snap. Elliott never sits, by the way. Certainly had a good game as a tackler. Board left with coverage responsibilities being on the end of the line of scrimmage like that. And Jonnu Smith got free in the left side of the end zone for the touchdown.
Yeah, considering Elliott was probably the best tackling defensive back from start to finish in that game, I'm surprised that they took him out for that play, and it looks like it cost him. And it's not the first time that they've had trouble with. I remember Anthony Levine in the Texans game having trouble with the tight end, and the Cleveland game. I believe the Ravens have given up more touchdowns to tight ends than wide receivers this year, which is indicative of issues in the middle of the defense.
Sure, that's really unusual. One of the things that it's going to keep coming up as a theme here is that the Ravens don't really have a third safety that they trust for their dime package. And the Ravens have always been a 3 safety, 3 corner dime primarily. They played a little bit of 4 corner dime. They had to do it against the Steelers, who go with 4 wide receivers on the field last year against the Arizona Cardinals. But generally, they like to play a 3 safety, 3 corner dime, which gives them effectively an extra inside linebacker who is a safety, who brings a lot more in terms of coverage skill to that middle of the field. And this year, they've been using instead Chris Board as that proxy. And I just don't believe he impacts the passing game in the way the Ravens would hope to optimally from that position.
Yeah. Snap 60 I have, which is fourth quarter, 4:07 left. They had Board covering A.J. Brown on a play that Board just couldn't do anything with that. That was a complete mismatch. But, this could be a case where we're not going to see a solution to this problem until next season. After Geno Stone, Nigel Warrior get a full training camp in, hopefully, or they bring in a free agent or something. Anthony Levine, unfortunately, is no longer the dime back that he used to be.
I agree with that. We've seen some of the problems with Levine this year in the Texans game where he actually got to start at big nickel. But it would be surprising to me if they allowed this to continue with the way it's gone. The season's now at the tipping point, I think we can fairly state, probably after the Pittsburgh game, but certainly within the next 2 weeks at some point. And the Ravens need to figure out how to plug the hole in the ship. Tramon Williams has played some safety. He could play on the back end, or he could play dime if they had to. They have Geno Stone that they could use, I think, as the dime back. All it really takes is a good short area zone player.
I think they just signed Pierre Desir too.
Cornerback, right?
Yeah. They're signing all these corners, but like you said, maybe they're signing corners in an attempt to see if any of them can move to safety.
Well, one of the things, and it'd be a shame if they had to, because Jimmy Smith has played great this year, but they could go back to playing Jimmy Smith on the back end of dime packages and let either Elliott or Clark move up, where either one would be a pretty effective dime. Certainly the role Clark played last year for a lot of the season.
We'll have to see. I think the more pressing thing, it's very fortunate in one respect that these aren't season-ending injuries for Campbell and Williams, but fixing the defensive line may be the best thing for the secondary, because they kind of go hand in hand. And if you have just a bigger, better, more consistent pressure from the DL,
it can
you'll be able to get away with less.
Yeah. I agree with that, but I don't think there's a reason not to fix both problems. And that's where I am on this, Jason. I agree with you completely that Williams and Campbell will greatly improve the defense, but if they still have Board as what is effectively their dime safety, I think they're giving away too much defensively, even with those guys back.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's just not something I would do. It doesn't match. But we'll see. They have a short week, and then I wonder if they'll be able to make the adjustments in a short week. But then after that, they're going to have a long week, and they should be able to get some extra X's and O's in between the Pittsburgh game and who's next after Pittsburgh?
Dallas. They have only classroom time this week and a walkthrough, which will be done in masks. So they don't have any real practice time on the field the way they did say last week. Now, in a short week, they wouldn't typically have a lot of that anyway, but at least they'd be on the field for an extra day.
Yeah.
So to not have that does, I think, make it a little bit more difficult for a player like Stone to become the free safety. I think they could still do it if they could live with Smith being a deep safety, that they could bring either Clark or Elliott up to play the dime with really no lost time. I think either of those two could do it. Clark certainly has done it already, so it wouldn't be a problem, I don't think, for him.
And then they could see if any of the street free agent cornerbacks can play.
There you go. Against Pittsburgh, we are expecting to see some 10 personnel and some 0-1 personnel as well, where they effectively have forced the Ravens into the 4 cornerback dime in the last meeting. So
yeah,
that basically takes up all of their current cornerbacks.
That's what turned the game around in that Pittsburgh game. It was
absolutely
the exact opposite of what happened in the Tennessee game.
Yeah,
and Roethlisberger. Pittsburgh has been, while Big Ben has been in the game, Pittsburgh's been more of a passing offense for some time now.
Yeah, very much so. And Roethlisberger got the ball out of his hands very quickly, but they were fearless about running out of an empty formation for those 2 scoring drives in the second half. And it was all basically taking advantage of Terrell Bonds. They completed 3 passes, had another pass interference penalty. But when you look at what those drives were, a bunch of short passes and a bunch of penalties, that was a lot of the offense. So, it was
penalties are a huge problem with this team right now. Huge. And you'll be going over a couple of penalties next podcast, and in this one, we had the pass interference call right off the bat was the one big penalty, and then the roughing the passer penalty.
Those were the 2.
On top of that, yeah.
The pass interference penalty, it was a penalty, and it's just something Humphrey needs to play better. And honestly, I thought his coverage was pretty decent, that he didn't really have to have his hand on the jersey and be doing give any of the other indicators to the referee, to the official, down that sideline that would get a flag drawn. The roughing the passer penalty, I've been saying these roughing the passer penalties are garbage, but this one was especially bad. It was a mid-thigh hit. He didn't wrap up at all, which is the point at which, even if first contact is above the knee, if you then forcefully contact below the knee, it's a roughing the passer call. He didn't do any of that. He didn't wrap up. He just allowed Tannehill to fall backwards off of that contact. And it didn't make any sense to me that they did a very big penalty in the game.
It's a sore spot with me. the roughing the passer thing. I mean, going all the way back to the Malice in His Heart days with Terrell Suggs. It's just it's a sore spot, and I don't know what I can say about it other than I wish it didn't happen. I know why it happens, but I don't think that makes it right. And but I can't. It's just one of those things that just frustrates you. I mean, the game as a whole was, if you weren't a Ravens or Titans fan and you had to watch through the whole game, it was excruciating. I mean, the stoppages from injuries and potential phantom injuries and reviews and double checking and penalties, and the last drive that Tennessee had before halftime, where they scored the field goal after doing the fake punt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the play that had the roughing the passer on it, if I'm correct.
It wasn't the fake punt. It was that drive.
235.
Yeah.
235. The McPhee roughing the passer right there. I literally almost fell asleep watching it. I caught myself nodding off. It was that bad of a viewing experience for me.
Okay, well, I match your frustration. Maureen and I are working during the game, so we don't have that same problem. The game can get very slow, and we're just happier because we're recording stuff and having to kind of trying to catch up to the video at certain times. So it's interesting that you felt that way about it. To me, it was a screaming at the TV experience, which is just annoys the heck out of me and makes the dog really upset too in our house. So
for me, that was the Pittsburgh game. I'm still not over it. I'm not going to be over it unless they win on Thursday, which I don't think they will. New England was just a lousy, rain-infested slog fest, and then the Tennessee game didn't really feel much different to me than the New England game. Right, but I mean, if you look at the season, at the start of the season, you take a look at the schedule, and I saw that 5-game stretch: Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, New England, Tennessee, Pittsburgh. That was the stretch of tough games, and right now they're 1-3, and they're looking at 1-4 in that tough part of the schedule in the middle of the season. I'm not sure what that's going to say, but Harbaugh teams in the past have been able to go on runs against bad teams after that. So the Ravens might very well be 6-5 and then finish the season 10-6 with a wild card anyway. But then what are they going to do in the playoffs? Because they have to play good teams.
We're way thinking ahead of this. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I want to get the
my
Ravens
mind goes all over the place sometimes.
I mean, it's not like I don't agree with you that they aren't a dangerous playoff team with their current roster as constituted. I just have to hope that the roster is constituted with the return of Williams and Campbell, and hopefully not a lot of other injuries while other teams have some, is going to level the playing field more. And we know that Harbaugh has a good record in the playoffs. The Ravens in general have a great record in the playoffs in their history, and they've been a good playoff team even on the road, and they're built defensively. I can hope for those things anyway, but we're way far ahead. We need to get through this regular season. If you would, let me backtrack a little bit, because I'm done with the packages. I want to move on. I want to talk about the pass rush a little bit and lay some numbers out there. So a few things I'm just going to toss out there, then we'll discuss it a little bit. Tannehill had ample time and space on 14 of 33 dropbacks. That's 42% as I scored it. Too much for today's game. That's effectively a 3-second pocket he's getting. He was good with those numbers. He generated a lot of it off of play action. One of the big problems was the play action really was fooling the edge defender who was committing to Henry.
Yes, I saw Ferguson get bit.
Yep.
A couple times. And Judon, Bowser, when they weren't in coverage. That's what they do. I mean, they have a simplistic style, but they commit to it, and it's Henry, and it's Henry, and it's Henry, and it's Henry again, and then it's play action a few times. And it works, or at least it worked in this particular game. But they're 7-3. I mean, it's they have their problems, but they're still 7-3, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah, they're not about it. They're a good football team, but they ran play action virtually every time Tannehill was under center. It was the automatic call when Henry was deep and Tannehill was, well, Henry's always deep if Tannehill's under center, but if every time Henry was behind Tannehill, basically they ran play action. And to me, there was, it wasn't like it wasn't to be expected. They just had the Ravens just needed to have a better response of having a person who's responsible for Tannehill on those plays.
And it's not only that, but there wasn't a whole lot of variety in what they were doing either. I saw, for example, I've got the first play of quarter 2, trips right. They have, and they repeated that on 236. They had a couple plays. Basically, they had trips right, and then they had Jonnu Smith on the other side covering the line by himself, and Jonnu Smith crossing, doing a crossing pattern. And they ran that same kind of play like 4 times in the game, and it wasn't really particularly any different what they did.
But that's tight ends beating Queen and Harrison in the middle who were biting, or Queen and Ford when that was those two, or Board alone when it was him. The inside linebackers just had a very unimpressive game in terms of pass coverage. They contributed extremely little to any pass plays. Queen had the quarterback hit on the interception. Harrison made a good play for -1 on a play in front of him. Board had a quarterback hit. None of them made a play on a ball behind them. None of them. You throw it between level 2 and level 3, you might as well not have underneath defenders. And
pretty much.
And that's my big problem. And that's why I think basically my basic problem is you have to go back to having a dime back. They had 9 snaps in that game where they had Board out there in obvious passing situations. You have to have a legitimate dime back in there. They've got the guy on the team. They just have to find another guy for the back end. And I think, having Geno Stone back there, I'll take my chances.
I agree. I completely agree with that. Or if not Stone, Nigel Warrior, if he's the guy, somebody that can actually do that. It puts a strain on the defense. This secondary is still really good. They played poorly, but this is one of the best secondaries in the league. But you can still ask them to do too much between the 5 of them.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you do that, and then you put somebody who can't cover, and you ask 5 people to play 6 defensive backs, it's a problem.
Right. I mean, it could even be they'll pick on Queen with a 3 on top of 4 situation, or even any situation where Queen is not rushing the passer basically, and is one of either 6 or 7 defenders who are dropping to levels 2 and 3. There's always the risk they'll pick on Queen. So that's not going to go away unless Queen is rushing the passer or not on the field on 3rd down. But having Board on the field on these downs isn't an adequate replacement for Queen. He's not getting it done in terms of stopping anything that's between level 2 and 3. So I'm at a point I don't think the Ravens can continue with this proxy dime they've been running. And I got us off track here because I really want to talk about the pass rush at this point, but we keep going back.
Yeah. Sorry. It's almost like the pass rush was a major concern at the start of the season, and now it's like it's the 3rd biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the edge rushers were good in this game, so I wouldn't even say it was a concern in this game. The only concern is interior pass rush not being what they want on early downs when they have to have their jumbo guys in, because those guys aren't providing much in the way of pressure. But the outside linebacker pass rush and the schematic pass rush, when they can get to the down and distance that is appropriate for that, no problem at all with how good that's been.
Ngakoue finally showed up on a few plays in this particular game, around the middle of the game, towards the end of the 2nd quarter, and the beginning of the 3rd quarter, and that was nice to see, including the strip sack fumble that created the 3rd and 16 situation.
Yeah, that was a terrific play. It was exactly what the Ravens got him to do, and he used his signature move, that chop move, to get past that left tackle with one hand to get there. which is exactly what we want to see. It checks all the boxes because it fans out that left tackle, creates a B-gap rush opportunity, which they didn't take advantage of on that play, and also allows him to get around the edge and often or occasionally get a pressure and get his arm on the quarterback in some way. Had another pressure earlier in this game, you probably saw it, where he put his hand on the quarterback on Tannehill, and Tannehill overthrew the ball. But I mean, Tannehill certainly felt that. It didn't feel like hard pressure, but it felt like my clock's run out.
Yes. And after the sack, he followed that up with another pressure.
Next play.
On the very next play that he was going towards Smith again, the tight end, but was inaccurate.
Yeah, he wasn't on the field for too much, which, by the way, I think is the appropriate usage for Ngakoue, and certainly against a team like the Titans, which run big. And we should get to this in the player stuff, but he was only on the field for 17 passes and 5 runs. That 22 snaps, that's the right amount to play Ngakoue when you're not sure if the team might be running. You don't want him on the field for run plays.
Yeah, he was absolutely appropriately used. He's not someone who's going to help your run defense that terribly much. He's reminiscent to me of the Elvis Dumervil type.
Yeah, a little bit same kind of build. A lot of people have compared him to Dumervil, but that's a good point. And certainly a smaller guy who you definitely want in as a passive ender. Elvis Dumervil, really an Iron Man when he played with the Broncos, but I don't know why they wanted him on the field on early downs.
Can't tell you there.
All right, let's continue on. A few more numbers about the pass rush here. They rushed 5+ on 55% of snaps. That's above their season average of 44%. Deception, they did not do too much of stunts, which they've had some real success with recently, but they only used 2 stunts in this game. That limited use, I think, was a function of trying to control the run game, not get players out of position, not destroy their gap responsibilities for Henry. So Henry's even having an impact on the passing game there. It may allow you to have a better chance to have screens develop because your exterior players are trying to either jam between 2 offensive linemen, or they're trying to stunt to the inside. Either way, it's not good for defending against a screen pass. So a lot of that, I think, the underuse utilization of stunts, that's not a good word because I think it was the correct utilization, but the low utilization of stunts was a function of what they had to do otherwise to respond to the Titans offense.
Not to mention the personnel. I mean, not having Campbell available changes what you can do on the defensive line, especially in regards to stunts.
Sure does. Wolf is also a good underneath guy, though. They could have used him some. And then you've got Ngakoue, Judon, Bowser, and Madubuike, all some quicker players who can do some overaction. But they didn't use it, and I respect the choice not to. Moving on to blitzes, they had 13 of those from off the line of scrimmage. That's a high total for the number of passes they had, but not an extraordinarily high total. It's 13 out of 33. 5 drops of 2. Oh, the point I want to make about that was a fair number of those were run blitzes. So you have to look at that and say they weren't really rushing the passer. Yeah.
They absolutely were. And I think that's on purpose. The idea being if you run blitz and there's a play action pass, sometimes you just happen to run into the quarterback.
Anybody who's ever played any tabletop football knows the blitz is pretty effective versus the run occasionally. It can allow a big spring, usually of a play, but also can get you for a loss there. So it's good to get people in the backfield, usually against the run anyway. 5 drops of 2+ players. The simulated pressure was fairly effective in this game. Those 5 plays, 3 quarterback hits, 1 other pressure, 2 out of 5 on conversions, and Bowser's interception was among those plays. So I thought that the simulated pressure worked out pretty well in this game.
Yes. Yeah. Bowser's interception was a momentum changer. That pretty much carried the Ravens. And I believe it's certainly a thing. What Ray Lewis called Uncle Mo, I think. But momentum, that play carried them through about a quarter and a half.
All right.
Of momentum on their side, and
all the way to
I really hope they re-sign Bowser.
Yeah, I agree. He's a very significant part of this defense, and there'll be not a lot of teams that have money to spend, so it's a good possibility a player like Bowser gets overlooked. But I tell you, when I was doing the Know Your Foe with a Patriots guy, Bowser and Judon are two players that he's already thinking Belichick wants. And I'm like,
Well, why wouldn't he?
Well, why wouldn't he? And the Patriots have more money than God next year, so it's a bad situation cap wise that could mean the Ravens lose a couple key players.
I don't see them keeping both Judon and Bowser, so I'm only hoping that they can keep one.
Fair enough.
If they can keep one, then they can still do some things.
Yeah, Bowser. I guess they're about the same age, but Judon would looks like he's going to cost a lot more at this point, certainly. Just want to mention briefly, we haven't talked about McPhee or Judon. Both of them had really good pass rush games. McPhee, I don't really blame for the penalty that wasn't. I'm just upset about the penalty. So he had two quarterback hits and 2 other pressures, and we had Judon.
He ended a drive on 3rd and 7 one time, 9:40 in quarter 2, on a pass that was intended for Brown.
Yep. And also extended a drive on 3rd and 7 once on a roughing the passer, which wasn't.
There were a lot of 2nd and 7s, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 6, even a 4th and 7. That was the fake punt.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I heard it said that the Ravens were clueless on that fake punt. We don't have a special teams play, but I just want to point out Levine was playing that exactly correctly. If he really didn't know what the hell was going on, he'd have been up there jamming that gunner. But he wasn't jamming the gunner. He saw what was happening. He saw a quarterback was in to take that up back snap, and he backed off to exactly the line to gain, which is exactly where he's supposed to be.
Unfortunately, couldn't do anything about it.
Unfortunately, he just could not quite get there. The pass was perfectly thrown, perfectly slotted in there, and it's just an unfortunate situation because that would have been a great opportunity for the Ravens to put the game away at that point, perhaps.
That stunk, but that play in and of itself did not lose the Ravens the game, and they tacked on a touchdown to make it 21-10. Well after that play, so sometimes you just got to tip your cap.
Right, I agree. It was just one of those plays. It was a well thrown ball. It was frankly a well defended ball. I don't blame Levine. Individual player discussions we normally do here, Jason. Let's take a couple players each here, but you go first, and a player you liked what they did, maybe that we haven't talked about so far.
That we haven't talked about. Well, I'll reiterate that I was happy most with Derek Wolfe's play. I think being the only starter left on the defensive line. There were a couple plays where he looked pretty bad, but for the most part, he was the best, perhaps sometimes the only defensive lineman that was doing well for the game. And he even made a play in overtime to stop a Derrick Henry run for little to no gain, which was like the one play that was successful in overtime for the Ravens.
Was it the loss of 2 they had in overtime where he wasn't blocked?
Might have been.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I'm looking at the Tennessee drive here. I don't actually see Wolf's tackle there, but that's okay. Wolf, I know he had a tackle for -2 that brought up 3rd and 10 earlier in the game, and that was it was a good play, but he was just unblocked. Which, by the way, that to me, that is one of those things where that's what's supposed to happen in terms of continuity problems or cohesion problems for an offensive line that's hardly played at all. And that's what the Titans had. I mean, that's supposed to happen. How did we not get more of that?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that.
All right. I also thought Wolf played pretty well, and certainly the best of the linemen. They had a lot of problems otherwise in terms of those guys not really doing the job. Ellis had a lot of snaps in this game. He's just being asked to do way too much. He played even more than Wolf, 55 to 53 snaps as I have it, and I take out the penalties and kneels and spikes, and you should get a slightly different number, but you should be relatively the same, that he played a couple more snaps than Wolf. Had 1 pressure in the game. Otherwise, he had, I think, 4 tackles, which is not terrible for playing the run as much as he did. 3 of those were on short yardage, so they were good defensive wins. Played his heart out, no doubt about it. He just was not good enough in the end to really hold the point of attack and keep those guards from moving up to level 2 off their double teams very quickly.
Ellis is just not that athletic of a guy on an NFL level. But I do like him for what he is. He should be a guy coming in reserve packages, but that's just wasn't available. I think, one of the great fallacies is this is next man up. I understand that if you are on a team, that's all you can do,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to gear your mind up for the next man up mentality. But sometimes if certain people aren't available, that's just the way it's going to be, you know. The San Francisco 49ers are on the outside looking in playoff wise right now, basically because of who's hurt.
That's right. And don't tell them next man up, or at least their fans. Their coach will sit there and take it because that's all he can do.
Yeah.
But the fans, they're like, screw you. we know why we lost this season.
And right now, Philadelphia Eagles fans are ready to run Carson Wentz out of town, but their offensive line, much like the Titans, is a mash unit.
That's what's supposed to happen, though, with a bad offensive line against the Ravens. Now, that game, unfortunately, was Calais Campbell who did most of the damage in that game, beating up on Jamil Brown, I believe it was, or Jamar Brown. I may have the name wrong. He was released the following day. So he's
one of the Browns.
Yes. But anyway, he had a tough game as defending the Ravens 3-tech, to say the least in that one.
And in this particular case, Ellis and Wolf were pretty much it. It was Ellis and Wolf, and like you said earlier, the rookies did not contribute.
Right.
So they ran out of gas eventually. But, I mean, Ellis, he stops Henry for 4 yards. He stops Henry for 3 yards. In the first quarter, 13:45 stops him for 4 yards. The second quarter, 2nd and 7, stops him for no gain.
I noticed he had 3 stops that were defensive wins. And so what you do is this is a good trick to do it if you're a football writer or you're just an interested fan. Go through the game book and do a control F on the player's name and look at the tackles he's made for how many yards they are, the tackles he contributed to. It's one of the things I report on regularly. And I think what you're doing obviously is a very good, method to find for a defensive lineman where they played well. Because oftentimes it's really hard to see that from the broadcast video, exactly how they're contributing to it. But at least if they were given a share of the tackle, you have one side of it. The other side
I see
is,
4.
Yeah.
I see 4 plays, 4 such plays, the maximum being the 4-yard gain.
A 4-yard gain was on what down and distance too?
That was a 1st and 10. Okay, that was one of their myriad Derrick Henry run up the middle plays on 1st and 10.
Okay, so that actually
became a 2nd and 6.
That actually would be a defensive win. So you got 4 on 1st and 10, 3 on 1st and 10, 1 on 2nd and 1. That's not a win. That's the problem.
No.
Okay, so otherwise they were good. But anyway, Ellis, it's not like he did nothing. It was not an effort that the Ravens needed from that position, and they need Brandon Williams back.
I said that in the Titans game.
All right, your turn.
I mean, not the Titans game. I said that regarding the Texans, I think.
Your turn next on another player.
Next on another player, Queen. We talked about him a little bit. I'm really not sure what I would do with Patrick Queen right now. I would potentially even consider putting him more on the outside because he's making plays in front of him. I saw there was a blitz. They blitzed him second play of quarter 2, 14-22, 3rd and 4, and he blitzed up the middle and he hid himself very well behind 3 or 4 people, and then bounced to the side where he bounced to the A gap, if you understand that.
I do, and the offensive line, the left guard, was not nearly quick enough to make the move to pick him up. That was Aaron Brewer.
So he's very good at that kind of stuff. He's just not there coverage wise. I'm not giving up on him. He's just a rookie. But he needs a full off season. in order to round out his game as a coverage linebacker. He has the athleticism to be a very good coverage linebacker, but he's got to have the light bulb turned on. I would consider starting to use him in different ways for the rest of this season than he's been used.
Right, I would agree with that. And here's the problem is it's got multiple layers here because the Ravens drafted him number one. Obviously, they need him to be the guy at Mike linebacker. It doesn't make sense for him to play Will because the Will doesn't stay on the field every down. He could, in theory, learn both positions, but that would make the learning curve that much different and move from Will to Mike on, say, passing downs. Okay. And if he were the complete player at some point in the future, that might be a reasonable spot for him with Harrison taking a 2-down Mike role. That would seem to make more sense in terms of the physical fit of those two players. But Queen as the Mike is being asked to be a good tackler, and he hasn't been. He's being
not particularly, no.
Yeah, and he's being asked to be a good coverage player, because not by the Ravens, by the other team who's picking on him constantly. And it makes it a very challenging situation for him to learn on the fly in the NFL. He's got tremendous tools. He's made all kinds of progress. Let's be clear here. The important thing to do right now for the 2020 Ravens, whose season is on the line, is not to grade Patrick Queen on the curve or for what he can do for this team 14 months from now. We need to know, what can Patrick Queen do for the Ravens right now? And if that's not what LJ Fort can do, or that's not what Harrison could do with some Mike, with Fort in as the will linebacker here, then they need to think about how do you pare back what he does and make his job more simple, put him in maybe some pass rushing situations, cut him back to 20 snaps a game instead of 55 snaps a game.
Could not agree more. That's the situation that they're at right now. Hey, if they lose 4 more games in a row and they're out of the playoffs and everything like that, put him in there.
He's your starter guy.
Yeah, have him learn. You're looking forward to 2021 at that point, so you'll be putting in more young players. But right now, he's a liability in certain situations.
Yeah, they've done the important thing, I guess. The important start is they've got him off the field on 3rd down. But the problem is that I don't really like exactly how they're doing that, which we don't need to go into any further than that. Additional players. Who do I want to talk about? We already talked a little bit about Ngakoue. Judon had a very good game in terms of rushing the passer. He had a sack, a quarterback hit, or 2 quarterback hits, and I believe a couple other pressures. So very positive game for Judon. He's playing much better since Ngakoue got here, and I think he's going to explode the rest of the season in terms of the numbers, quarterback hits and sacks he gets, because of the way they're aligning him off ball, a lot of which will be able to take advantage of Ngakoue's gap opening skills, and not to mention the stunt abilities underneath that the Ravens have.
Yeah, I think after the supposedly the Pittsburgh loss coming up, they're going to be going against some more NFC East teams, like the Dallas coming up, and they still got to play the Giants, I think.
Yep.
Jacksonville, they're still on the schedule.
Cincinnati.
The Cincinnati game without Joe Burrow is on the schedule. Jacksonville. So you're going to see the defense start looking better against teams that aren't. I wouldn't say like personnel wise, Tennessee's offensive line was horrible, but they're coached up. They have a very good sense of what they're doing, and they have an idea of situational football and all that kind of stuff. And you've got organizations from the top down that have problems with communication and scheme and philosophy coming up, that you're going to see this defense maybe look better down the stretch of the season than it actually is. But you're going to see Judon and Ngakoue and Bowser and perhaps even Ferguson and McPhee, you're going to see them start I think you're going to see them start to light it up.
Sure should
toward the end
happen.
of the season.
A lot of quarterbacks not getting the ball out quickly ought to really help, and that's what
And
did
some
it
really
early
bad
season.
quarterbacks coming up.
All right, Josh, let's go to the mailbag here. I know we got some questions.
All right, yeah, long show today, so we're just going to take a couple right now, and we'll squeeze some more in tomorrow. This is your mailbag, your chance to get your questions in using the hashtag Filmstudy mailbag. First one up is there any particular philosophies or concepts you would like to see integrated into the defense this offseason via a coaching hire?
That's a great question. I pretty much love the way Martindale had been running the defense in every way except this proxy dime back bull crap. Otherwise, I'm really happy with everything he does. I love the schematic pass rush. I think it makes more out of less. I love his snap management. That's at a wonderful level. I love generally the way he's addressed things to use extreme packages in extreme situations. Even that, in a sense, we've seen that the last couple of weeks. They played 0 dime snaps. This week, it's kind of an extreme response to a running team. So I like a lot of what Martindale does. I don't think he deserves any sort of grief as a coordinator at this point. How about you, Jason?
Ditto.
All right, nice and simple.
Fast mailbag.
All right, let's close it out with this. The Ravens struggled to tackle on Sunday. How much of that is because they are trying to punch the ball out and going for the strip? Is that hurting actual tackles?
I do not believe so, no.
I agree.
I think that the Humphrey, he's kind of started this fruit punch craze with the Ravens. He is tackling the guy while he's doing that very efficiently, normally. And I didn't see... I saw a few arm tackles, but they were not going after the ball when they were arm tackling. They were just tired.
Yeah, I agree. I think in particular, the 4 missed tackles on the Brown touchdown, which was one of the high volume scream at the TV moments in the game. It was Clark first, who he wrapped, but he just couldn't hold. He was too tired. Then you had Peters, who missed it a yard further on. Then you had a Humphrey who overran the play. Then you had Queen, who got steamrolled 5 yards into the end zone. So I don't think it was fruit punching, any of that.
Yeah, I was more jersey grabbing than fruit punching.
All right. Jason, is there anything we can plug for you?
Well, I am on the RSR message board. I'm WNC Ravens fan, if you want to catch me on that. And I also tweet at 25 Nuggets.
All right. That's simple. 25 Nuggets. All right, Ken, this week is a compact week. We've got all the normal shows. We've got the Situation Room came out this morning. Every other show that's normally out is coming out, but we've got to cram it all in before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we've got about an 18-hour, 16-hour cycle for these shows rather than normal 24 hours. And so look for them more frequently on the site, if you will. The defense article is up there already. The offensive line article will come out on Wednesday. And in between, we've got a number of podcasts. We've already done Know Your Foe. Know Your Foe will be out on Tuesday afternoon. Correct, Josh? So they'll be hearing this tomorrow morning in theory.
All right. Yep. So the schedule is the Situation Room came out Monday morning. The defensive breakdown came out overnight Tuesday morning. Tuesday late afternoon will be Know Your Foe. Wednesday into Thursday overnight will be the offensive breakdown. Wednesday evening will be the by the numbers. Thursday we all get to enjoy with our family that lives in the same household and watch the Ravens game.
And a great thing to do is just stick an earbud in and listen to those podcasts during that time while your family is fighting with each other.
Right. Especially when your family this year is just going to be on Zoom. You can just mute them. Nobody knows.
There you go. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show. Do you need to plug anything else, Josh? I'm sorry. I'm okay.
No.
Jason, really
That's it.
appreciate you coming on the show. And I want to direct people. One of the reasons I found Jason originally is just because the very high level of conversation he provides. Make sure you follow him. If you go to RSR, look at the posts that he does, because they're at a very high level of quality. Generally, there's a lot of good conversation there. And Jason, I just really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show with us.
Thank you very much for the flattery, and I am proud to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Jason, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.